It's an irrational exuberance that causes movies to be made at such extraordinary amounts of money.
This week we have legendary executive Barry Diller, the first to cross from television into movies and later the visionary behind some of the biggest shifts in entertainment.
Do you think it was a better business back then?
I think it was creatively much better. I can't bear sequels of these movies that run too long for no good reason and inexplicable narrative. People in the movie business look down on the people from television as an inferior class of people. And I was the first person from television to go into the movie business, basically because Charlie couldn't care less what anybody else thought.
He went on to pioneer cable in the internet age, building IAC, Expedia, and ventures that transformed how we shop, travel, and experience media.
In the middle of its closing, 9/11 came and travel stopped completely. People around me said, well, you can't buy this thing. There is no travel. And somebody in the room said, well, if there's life, there's travel. And I said, well, that's it. And we closed the deal. And of course, travel came back, et cetera, et cetera.
And the rest is history.
Man, yeah.
I'm Enrique Dubugras, and welcome to HD and HD. This episode is brought to you by Brex, a brand I'm proud to have co-founded and one that's shaped by the same journey many of you are on. Brex has everything startups and fast-growing companies need to make every dollar count, from modern corporate cards, banking, and treasury, to accounting, automation, travel, and expenses. Over 25,000 companies, including DoorDash, Scale AI, and Anthropic, spend smarter using Brex.
Well, Barry, first,
Yes.
Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Happy to do it.
I was trying to remember the first time we met, and I think the first time I met you, you probably don't remember.
Well, who knows? I remember so little.
Yeah, but it was once at it was the Met Gala. I think it was
The Met Gala.
Exactly. And I said that I knew Alex, your stepson as and you said, no, my stepson, my son, I treat him like family.
Yes. Very much so.
I remember that was interesting to me, and that kind of after reading the book and seeing how close you are with your family, that's been very inspiring. So tell me, your dad, from the book, he seemed like he was pretty successful building his business, quote unquote. What do you think you learned from him business wise?
I don't know that I actually learned. Well, there is one thing that my father was relatively uncommunicative and somewhat stoic, and my parents kind of lived an independent life pretty much from each other. But the one thing I got from my father was how honest he was. He was a deeply honest person. He actually didn't take much joy in anything. And I never could figure out what he actually did. I know what he did because they built all this stuff in LA and in the surrounding area of LA. But what I mostly got from him was his absolute honesty.
And was that in business in the sense of like he would?
It was in everything. It was just his nature.
Interesting. And do you think you're clearly like that too? So
I hope so.
And then you grew up. It was very interesting reading where you were kind of in the middle of Hollywood when Hollywood is being formed, I guess, right?
That's not that early. I'm not that old.
Well, definitely much smaller than it is today.
In the late 50s, early 60s is when my career life began. And I was very lucky that the people who really founded it, a few of them were still around, and I got to know them.
Who were the founders in your view?
Well, the founders were the Warner family, founded Warner Brothers, the Zuckers, who founded Paramount, which was actually the first company. Paramount was the first actual studio. The Lemleys at Universal. They were these kind of William Fox and Zanuck. There were like five mostly Jews from Eastern Europe, not Germany. And they really were the founders.
And were they kind of like business people? They're more creative?
No. They were the whole equation in their head. They started, most of them, with very primitive Nickelodeon theaters where you see a few frames pass, motion pictures, like people saw a train on a film strip which scared them to death because no one had ever seen that before. So the originators it was so primitive. They started in the theater business, and then they realized that they had all these seats. Unless somebody figured out stuff to make for them, these seats would remain empty. So they got into the production business. And then you wouldn't call them creative souls, and yet they were enormously actually creative in the decisions they made of what to produce and make resonated with the world, which is quite remarkable.
And did you look up to them when you were kind of like in your teens?
Well, I loved the history of it because the history was so dramatic as to how the whole thing formed and fascinated me, and I wanted to participate in it. But by the time I came along, they were really gone. I mean, they were just a few of them. Daryl Zanuck was still dodderingly active, but mostly so that he could get his various mistresses work so that they would be mistresses to him and not overly burden him.
What was one story that you remember from the time that, you fascinated you?
Well, the story of, there's a wonderful book called not a kingdom, something of our own, written by Neil Gabler about these founding people. And each of there's not one little story. There's the entire really history of an industry that got made up by a very few people.
Yeah, no,
so that fascinated me.
I will go on to read that one because I'm very interested in history of these industries.
Their own. Anyway, it's Neil Gabler.
And then when you're going through your teenage years, right? Like, were you already, you weren't thinking that you wanted a career in movies, or you were already thinking that?
No, the only thing, I was basically hibernating, and I had not much of an idea in my head for a whole lot of reasons. And I was kind of just floating around. But and I thought, I'm now 19, 20, I don't want to go to university. And I thought, well, I got to do something. And the only thing, it wasn't like, oh, I've got to go to work, because I didn't have that pressure. But the only thing that intrigued me was the entertainment business. And so I thought, I'm 19 then, and I'm thinking no one's going to pay any attention to me. But I thought I could go to William Morris Agency, this theatrical agency that had been in business for 70 years and had the entire history of the entertainment business under its building walls. I thought, oh, I could go there and learn. And that's what I did.
Would you consider yourself ambitious at that time?
No.
No.
Absolutely not.
Was that something that kind of grown into you?
It was such a shock to everyone around me, particularly my family, who thought I'd never work and didn't really care much. And I absolutely had no functioning ambition. I was not like stirring. I was becalmed, and my family had a lot of resources, so I didn't have to do anything. And I was kind of living this kind of nocturnal, little wayward kid life. But once I started in the mailroom of William Morris, and I had known that I was so interested in entertainment, but I was so fascinated by it that it galvanized me. And suddenly I realized, you know what, there's a motor stirring in there. And I've never been able to shut it off since then.
It's so interesting because, you were, when you became the CEO of Paramount at 32, was it?
Yes.
Which at the time, there's not a lot of, is there anyone else that was like at that age,
No, not even close.
Which it's kind of fascinating to me that like, how is it that it was like no ambition, before, and then out of the blue was the youngest, to kind of do this?
Well, I was actually, before that's at 32, but at 26, it was 26. I was the youngest vice president of ABC television network in the history of television. So I was very kind of lucky, whatever circumstantial, serendipitously young and ridiculously successful at a ridiculously young age.
But like, why do
Where
you
did
think
this
that
come
happened?
from?
Yeah.
What do you mean? Why? Most things come, at least my experience, from serendipity. I mean, now I think everybody gets a certain amount of it. I've gotten a tremendous amount of serendipity of situations that were unpredictable. You could have never predicted that. For instance, my first job at ABC, I accepted to become the assistant to the middle level executive at ABC. And the day I agreed to do that, I'm 22 or 3, just 23. The day that I said, yes, I'll become your assistant, they fired the czar of all of ABC's programming. And they reached down and they picked my middle level guy to be the head of programming and head of the network. And I became his assistant.
Oh, wow.
And so where do you go write that one down? Where do you predict that? Now, did I do something with it? Yeah, but I have so many of those markers that you can only say that serendipity had an enormous amount to do with it.
But what do you think? Obviously, you got a lot of shots on goal, but you scored a lot of them as well. What do you think you were really good at already at that age?
At seducing people.
Interesting. Was it conscious or unconscious?
No, it was definitely not. I mean, it was not like, oh, I know how to do this. Let me turn this trick.
Yeah.
It just was, I knew how to please people. All sorts of reasons in earlier times of mine that were necessary for me to please people, to get out of worries that I had. And I think this is generally true, that the difficulties that you have, can be true, that all the things that made your life difficult, age 4, 6, 10, 12, 14, 16, whatever those are, all those things actually become little power levers for eventual abilities to succeed. And they were not certainly fun to go through. Most adversity is not. But the things that you automatically develop, aside from your own biology, which is its own cookery, the things that you develop out of adversity become your kind of unique powers. And I had a lot of adversity, so I had a lot of unique powers. Now, you can take adversity and let it destroy you. But if your biology is strong, the opposite can happen.
It becomes like your biggest weaknesses are your biggest superpowers as well.
Yeah.
So if you had to you probably mentored people over the years. And
I hate that word. It's too official.
Well, why do you hate it?
Because it's too official. It's too, the whole mentoring thing, which gets bureaucratic, and and people choose each other off because it's kind of imposed on them. I just resist such stuff. But a lot of people have been in my orbit. I don't know that I've, quote, mentored anyone.
So maybe let's pick that. So from people in your orbit,
yes.
What do you think they would have learned from you about how to please people or seduce people?
No, I don't think you get that.
No,
I mean, I don't think you get that. You just talked about these tools that you develop out of adversity.
Yeah,
you can't teach that to any, and there's no teaching there. The going up, having people in your orbit means essentially they are observers and reactors, and they kind of learn from being in. It's almost osmosis. They learn from being in your environment, and if they're malleable enough, young enough to be impressionable, which I think is the best way to develop people, is before they've had experience. And they're in your environment and they see the processes you use, not necessarily your, quote, native abilities, but just your way of functioning. It allows them to develop their way of functioning best, which is why the concept, that little word bubble that you have above your head about mentoring, is to me so empty.
Yeah, because it
seems
makes
like
it,
instructive.
yeah.
And I don't really believe that instruction, again, I hated school, so I don't like being instructed.
Yeah, no,
I like,
I get it.
Yeah.
It's
Pulling stuff.
Makes sense. So let's talk a little bit about the business, of let's start with the network back then. Give us, for those of us who weren't there at the time, what was the business of cable back then, and like what was your exact
Well,
role?
first of all, back then, this is the 60s and 70s, there were only 3 networks. There was no cable. I mean, cable was basically just used to pull signals so that you could get a better picture if mountains or other obstructions didn't give it to you, because everything was over the air and kind of line of sight. But you only had 3 television networks controlled in the United States 100% of the viewing. So today, a successful audience is 5, 7, 9 million. Then it was 30 million, because you were really dividing by 100 million households by 3. So the 3 networks were enormously powerful. They were the only mass engines of communications, other than movie theaters and local newspaper. Almost all newspapers were local.
Yeah. And then did you understand like what the business was of cable network back then? And
cable, don't use the word cable. There was no such things.
Yes, network.
They were called broadcast networks.
Broadcast networks.
Yes.
Did you understand the business of the broadcast networks?
Well, of course, it was all based on 100% revenue came from advertising. It did not come from consumers. It came from advertisers. Television was, quote, free to consumers.
And then your job was, after being an assistant, you got promoted to be the picker, right, of the movie of the week. Is that kind of the best way to think about it?
Most things on television then were hour or half-hour series, where everything was basically in stasis, meaning people didn't get old. I mean, they got old physically, but their roles were the same in playing characters in television series. And I thought, well, I wasn't very much interested in that, but I was interested in making original movies for television, which hadn't ever happened. Nobody did that. And so we invented this concept called Movie of the Week, where we made the first year 25 original movies. And the next year we got up to 40 or 50. And by the third year, we were making 75 movies a year.
And why do you think you were good at doing that without having done that ever? How did you learn how to make movies?
Go ask Harry. I mean, like anything, again, whole aspects of the entertainment business, every part of it interested me. But I never really I didn't think that I was equipped to make editorial decisions, because I'd never done it before. But the thing is, it's how you get experience. You teethe on something and you essentially develop some sort of expertise in your fingertips. And I had sold at the age of 24 and a half or something. I sold this idea that we wanted to make these movies. Everyone thought they would fail at ABC. And so nobody really wanted to be around it. And so they let me do it because they thought it would fail. And I surprised them. But to answer the question, and I think this is great, I think if you're a manager of business, the best way to learn how to be a manager is, of course, to start something where you're essentially the first employee, and you've got to hire people to help you get stuff done. But in doing so, you essentially learn each role as you progress to build an organization. Because when you're starting something with a blank piece of paper, that's the only way you can do it. You don't go out and hire 12 people the first hour of the first day. I had to hire people to read scripts, to write scripts, to then perform all the functions of getting this stuff done. So in 12, 18 months, I think probably initially we were a couple of 100 people, but every role in that organization I developed. So I got to know how it worked and how to make it work. And so it taught me the individual role, but again, by process, it taught me how to be a manager because there was no other way for me to learn it.
No one was teaching you how to be a manager.
No, I mean, to me, listen, B schools, MBA programs have a value of some kind, although I doubt it, at least for me, and for my observations of others. I think it's far better than that kind of learning process to be dropped into a situation where you actually have to do things that teach you by the things you're doing.
It was basically a startup within.
It was a complete startup, yes, from zero.
Yeah. And you had to learn how to do everything. And if you failed, it's on you. And if you succeeded, you also got
And again, the only reason a kid got to do it, and I think this is probably true of lots of other situations, is because no one else wanted it, and because I thought it would fail.
Yeah. No one of the other more experienced people were interested in it.
Of course, because they all saw the risks. I only saw the opportunity.
And was there anything structural that made it work as well, or just you made great movies, therefore it worked?
Like so many things, time and circumstance.
Yeah.
I am the beneficiary of a time when 3-network programming was very constricted, and there wasn't much variety in it. And so, as a counter programmer, which I love and have been for life a counter programmer, meaning programming where others aren't, countering what is obvious with something that's not obvious, that the moment gave that to me. I didn't invent that. I was just the beneficiary of circumstance and timing.
Yeah, that was the opportunity that was available at that moment in time for you.
At that moment, I was in a particular place with a particular set of circumstances. I didn't create those circumstances. I had an idea, a somewhat original idea, I guess, but the circumstances that allowed me to succeed were not of my making. They were structural.
Do you think that, like, in the end, you developed taste from this experience of like what a
Well, this is an interesting thing. Taste. Yes. I don't know. I'd use the better word. I'd use a word that I think is better, which is instinct. When you're making decisions in the world of creating things, product, is an editorial process. You're saying, I will do this, I won't do that. Just take it as when we're making 25 movies, it's all right, what one movie do you make as against not make, meaning this idea versus that idea. So it's, in a way, it's a bit binary. And if you are lucky enough that your mainstream instincts, if you keep them clean, and that your mainstream instincts are consistent with the general population or large subsets of that general population, out of that process, if you repeat it enough, whether or not it eventuates into better taste or less better, I don't think taste is the word. It's instinct and the ability to keep your instincts fresh and clean so that you can make those decisions, those editorial decisions.
Got it. So it's something you think comes out of experience and pattern recognition, and also if it somewhat aligns with the general population, then you make a hit.
It's if you're, again, lucky enough or whatever, there's no research that can ever tell you the tale. There's no facts that benefit you or that you can refer to that will allow you to make better decisions. It's all instinctive. So if you've got a set of basic instincts that resonate with the general public, things will work out better for you.
Who did you look up to at that moment in time? Like, who were you kind of like getting inspired from? Is it your boss? Is it
No, not particularly. I mostly saw flaws, but I'm lucky. I don't have any envy, or jealousy of So first thing I would think of is what do I look up to? Did I look up to people? I mean, people who were, I would say I looked up to people who were confident.
Interesting.
Because I didn't have any. So,
you didn't have any?
No.
Wow, that's surprising to hear, given how much you have right now.
I don't know how much I have now, but whatever. I have experience and whatever, God knows age and whatever. But yeah, I think that the people that I went, wow, are people who I saw had native confidence.
Was Charlie one of those?
Charlie Bluhdorn?
Yeah.
Oh my God, no, Charlie Bluhdorn was such a huge combustible character. He was like when I met Charlie Bluhdorn, and I was 25. He was not old. He was maybe 30, no, 40, I guess. And this is in the 60s. And when I met him, this was a time in the United States and actually probably the world, the United States led it certainly, where conglomerates had been functioning for maybe a decade or so, which was multi-business businesses. And Bluhdorn built from scratch probably the largest conglomerate of its time, which owned, there's the conglomerates in this case, kind of similar, certainly not to the way Berkshire built its multi-business business that covers so much ground. But I think Gulf and Western, which was this company, I don't know, maybe 30 or 40 individual companies, from making bumpers for cars to sugar refineries, sugar plantations, to industrial, highly sophisticated. I mean, in other words, just endless numbers of companies under one roof, assembled by this brilliant Austrian immigrant to America at the age of teens, I guess. Just an incredible industrialist.
And why were conglomerates a thing, and why do you think they're not a thing anymore?
Well, because they're, I don't know what conditions produced them. I think, again, it was just the energy of a few individuals. There were only 4 or 5 big conglomerates, multi-business businesses. What produced them was the stock market, because what happened with Gulf and Western, and I think with several others, is they made acquisitions because their paper value kept accelerating. So they would buy a company for stock. The market would like that, pushing their stock price higher. They used those securities to buy more. The dilution was gigantic, but the rising price was also gigantic as
low
this
cost capital
spinning thing kept going. Yes, so they were the rage until it became clear they were all unmanageable. You couldn't manage that many enterprises efficiently, and so the flywheel really turned against them, and they went out, I don't know, probably in the 80s.
That's when it started going to. I think they got picked apart by private equity.
And I was going to say, private equity was let's call it a better model.
Yeah.
But Charlie, which started all this, was the person who got me to come to Paramount. You just had to be in the room with. There's no one I'd ever known. He would buy or sell anything. If you walked into this room, before either of us walked out of the room, something would be bought or sold. He was that voracious. His appetite was gigantic.
What did you learn from him?
Oh my God, I don't know. I learned it. I don't know. Again, I don't know that you learn, or at least I didn't learn any particular. How could I learn from Charlie? Was a genius. I watched him and observed him. He took the sugar market when I'm pretty sure this is true. This is somewhere in the late 70s, early 80s, from 6 or 7 cents to 62 cents.
Oh, wow.
And on the 62nd cent, he sold it and drove it down back to 6 cents.
I made a ton of money.
He made more money than you could ever even conceive of in
Wow.
1 year. Yeah. Because he dominated. Gulf and Western owned a company called South Puerto Rican Sugar, which owned basically the sugar production of the Dominican Republic.
And what do you think he was just a very good deal maker? Was that kind of the thing?
It's not that he was in insatiable everything. So yes, he could. He had a first-rate brain. He could add boxcar numbers and divide them in his head. So he had that ability, but he also had, as I say, this voracious appetite and energy. And there was nothing that he saw in front of him that he didn't want.
Just ambition to the extreme.
Yes. And he died, he was 56 when he died. So he died quite young.
Yeah, very much so. And would the companies have like a shared culture or no?
No,
Each company
absolutely not.
No, every company was its own company.
They were all kind of, yes, they were, again, they weren't really optimally managed. They weren't efficient, let's call it. It wasn't kind of, let's cut the costs and, make, because we operate a lot of things, we can make things, simpler on a dollar averaging basis. But they were opportunistic. I mean, the range of companies was just so incredibly diverse. But he bought Paramount out of almost bankruptcy. And by his just wily way of being able, the tale of how he acquired each of these companies was like a great opera buffet drama, every one of them.
So, but all of them were in situations that weren't like he'd never overpaid for stuff, I guess.
Never.
Makes sense. It was always like a good.
No, never. Book value.
Book value. Oh wow.
Oh no. Charlie was. Some book that I used to see him rifle through, which was, this is way before obviously any digital data. There was some book that that in it had every company and endless little tables in it that you could derive book value from. And anytime a company would just flip to it and he would say, this is the book value, how much under it can I buy the thing for?
Oh, wow. So it was very much the like buy it at a cigar butt theory.
Yeah, in a way.
This episode of HD and HD is brought to you by a brand that's close to my heart, Brex. When we started Brex, it wasn't just about creating another financial product. It was about solving the real gritty challenges that founders and startups face every day. Building something from the ground up is hard enough without having to navigate clunky legacy banks with endless fees. That's why Brex is the financial stack that scales with you, no matter where you are on your journey. From maximizing runway to earning yield on your cash, Brex was designed to make every dollar count so you can focus on what really matters, building your dream. So whether you're just getting started or you're ready to take on the next big thing, Brex has your back. Check it out and see why the world's most innovative startups like Anthropic, Scale AI, and Robinhood trust Brex.
When he picked you to do Paramount, like you were like now running a successful movie.
I was at ABC.
At ABC.
Yeah. I was definitely, we had been successful making not only movies, but then we started the novel for television, which became the miniseries. So yeah, we were really successful then.
So when he hired you were a little bit more of a known quantity or not even?
Well, because we were very successful, I was definitely known, but this is 1974. God, so long ago. Anyway, this was a period when nobody in television had ever been allowed to be in the movie business. People in the movie business looked down on the people from television as an inferior class of people. And I was the first person from television to go into the movie business, basically because Charlie couldn't care less what anybody else thought. And he thought I'd be good at it.
And you think if you were in his shoes, you would have done the same thing or no?
You mean picking myself?
Yeah.
Unlikely.
Unlikely?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, just because, I wouldn't, I don't know that I'd have the guts that Charlie had to do things in the way Charlie did them. I don't know. Maybe I would have. No idea.
And then when you go into Paramount, tell me a little bit about like what was success look like? Was it just like making great movies? Was that what drove the
Well,
business?
again, this is before Paramount was very little in. Most movie companies weren't. Paramount wasn't much in the television business, making television shows. Paramount was a movie company.
Yeah.
Although, because I came from television, after a few years, we started making television shows, and we ended up making 5 of the top 10 television shows. It was a movie company, and the work was that you develop movies, and they were either successful or not successful. And I had not liked the way movies had been made by these major movie companies, because I thought they were all packaging things from known elements that were big stars, and people had leverage. And I thought it was antithetical to a real development process, which is you develop material based upon scripts or about ideas, and then you got to the point where you thought, oh, this is really good script. Then you choose all the other elements to put it together, rather than the way movie businesses had been organized, which was backwards, which was taking the elements and then choosing the material, which I didn't like as a process. And that took 2 years. We failed miserably for a couple of years until we got it together.
How many years until it worked?
So for 2 years, we were between 5th and 6th of the success of movie economy, meaning we were a failure. And then we got it together, figured out this flywheel that I was describing earlier. And I think the first big smash movie was Saturday Night Fever.
Oh yeah, that's
which is kind of a classic film. And after that, we went from last place to first place, and we held it for the next 7 or 8 years. The movie business was predominantly put together with elements rather than material, and I flipped it to make it material rather than elements.
Got it. So start with the script and the story, and then just have people.
Yeah.
And how was producing a movie back then different than now in terms of like?
Well, listen, things cost X and now they cost Y, and it's not simply inflation. It's just it's kind of, I don't even know, it's an irrational exuberance, let's call it, that causes movies to be made at such extraordinary amounts of money, mostly to me wasted, just my point of view. Anyway, you're still making something that is seen at a length of 110 to 140 minutes or so. And so the basics are all the same. What is different now, then there were nothing, there was no such thing as a sequel. And it was like, I can't even think of, we never made a sequel to anything. And there were really not blockbuster movies up until the 70s and 80s, with Jaws actually was the first one. So the stakes were different. Now it's much more a merchandising business than it was then. What it was then, and it still can happen today, but the whole emphasis today on, for instance, the Marvel universe, making movies that are sequels to successful movies, is essentially the bread and butter of movies today, rather than making original films.
Why do you think, when you say about merchandising, like what do you mean by that exactly? Like how does the business change in terms of the business model? The
business has changed because now the investments are so much higher, meaning if you take one of these sequels, whether it's the Star Wars, Star Trek, all these franchises, Fast and Furious, etc., they cost $200 million to make, and you're going to make a movie for $200 million. You're going to spend $100 million or more on marketing it and merchandising it. So they become their own self-fulfilling elephants that are conceived that they have to be successful or else they'll break the bank. Whereas in the alternative way movies were made before, you would never really be risking an individual movie. Very rarely would you have a movie that was very expensive, other than the quote average of what a movie would cost.
What was the average back then?
No, I mean, we're dealing again in, let's see, 1970s, 80s, 90s dollars, 30 million, 40 million, something like that.
Oh, wow. So big difference, including marketing, including everything.
Oh, huge. Yes. The differences are huge.
Yeah. Wow. Do you think it was a better business back then?
Better business. I think it was creatively much better. I can't bear sequels of these movies that run too long and have 5 acts, 5 endings for no good reason, and inexplicable narrative.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think creatively it was better. I mean, the numbers are now so big that if you have a series of franchise movies that succeed, you're probably making, inflation adjusted, you're probably making much more today than you were. But the creative output is so much less.
Makes sense. So potentially better business, but worse quality of movies.
I think so.
And, I think you from Paramount, obviously crushed it there. And was that the point in time of your career that you felt that that was the, in terms of recognition, things was that the top of it, given that industry, or no, later on was much more?
I've had a lot of tops.
Yeah.
I can't help it.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
I could cadge a few, but in fact, I've just been whatever enough that in each of these decades, I've had projects that have had relevance. So, I at each point you could say, there was a pretty impressive recognition and whatever. And because I was the first, I did a lot of things that hadn't been done before and were discounted and presumed they would fail. And so when they didn't, because they had not been done before, they hadn't been out of fashion or whatever, I kind of got supercharged recognition from each of them.
And when you went to Fox, was that a similar, hey, what I did at Paramount, I'm doing at Fox, or you had to reinvent it again from?
No, at Fox, the principal thing, we brought the same flywheel about making movies. That's never changed, would never change for me. I've run 3 movie companies, so I've had the similar playbook. But what we did at Fox, at the time, there were 3 television networks that had 100% of the viewing of everybody in the US. And I thought there should be a 4th. And so we started Fox Broadcasting, which was also a startup from, blank piece of paper, as an alternative to these 3 networks. And it took about 1.5 years to pull that through. And then we became actually the most watched network.
What did it take to launch a new network back then?
You mean dollars?
Just how would you even do that back then?
It wasn't easy. The first difficulty was actually getting enough individual broadcasters in the United States that were not affiliated with the 3 networks, which were very few. They were all actually ultra high frequency. They weren't.
So maybe explain that a little bit more. What do you mean? Who were the broadcasters? What was the relationship with the networks?
Broadcasting, before there's cable, the only way you could receive a television or anything is through the air, through broadcasting it on frequencies. First radio frequencies, and then spectrum was added for television frequencies. And if you had a local television station, you borrowed that frequency, didn't pay for, federal government licensed you to operate it, quote, in the public interest. And then you could offer programming and advertising. And there were only enough stations really to supply 3 television networks, and then some straggling stuff. And we organized the stragglers and started new broadcasting stations to create a fourth service that would cover the United States. And that was a very difficult thing.
And was it profitable from the beginning?
No,
or
no,
no?
no,
No, you
no,
lost
no,
money
no.
for a long time.
Not a long time, shockingly, actually. Now, this is 86, 85, 6. I think we broke even after investing about $130 or $40 million in the 85th week, which was pretty good.
How does one raise that money? You'd have to have, I know.
No. It was general debt that we raised, actually, at
Against
Fox.
what?
Against the Fox company, which was,
The
in the movie business and television business.
So that was very profitable.
Yeah, it was profitable enough. And it didn't take that much capital. It just took a lot of sweat.
To get all the licenses and
to get it all together and start the program, wheel going and all that investment you had to, time and sweat. And
you worked a lot with Rupert back then, right?
I did, yes.
What do you think was his kind of, what he was really good at?
Oh, Rupert's the greatest gambler I know.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Industrial. Listen, when you think Rupert Murdoch started one little newspaper in Adelaide in Australia, and went on to conquer the media business in Australia, then goes to Britain and does the same thing, and then comes to the US and does the same thing on 3 different continents. That's pretty
kind
good.
of unheard of, right? Of people coming from outside the US and winning. So
no one ever has or will. Rupert's just he bets against the establishment to establish what he wants to do, usually against the establishment wishes, and he pulls it off.
How you think he pulls it off? He just fights harder than everyone?
Well, when you say it's a combination of an enormous number of talents, the biggest talent of which is his understanding of risk and how he will, quote, take risk. That's, to me, the most impressive part.
And is it that he understands risk that looks like risk for most people, but he actually sees that it's actually not that risky? Is that maybe how?
No. I don't think it's that. I think he's willing to take on risk at greater levels than anyone else and to do it in an unprotected way. He does not hedge his risk.
But then why do you think he hasn't blown up, I guess? Because if you do that for long enough.
Well, he did actually come very close because he price to Rupert was not really an issue for anything he wanted to acquire.
It wasn't like Charlie.
It's the opposite.
Yeah.
And so he bought actually a thing called TV Guide for overpaid by billions of dollars. And then in the late 80s, I guess, the markets went against him and the debt was too large and he couldn't service the debt and had to refinance and do all these things, that saved him. But he came very close.
Interesting. So
he liked coming close.
He liked being close to the edge.
Yeah, I think so.
And did you absorb some of that for yourself?
I've never been as big a risk taker as Rupert, never will be. But I got comfortable with risk.
Because after that, after Fox and making it hugely successful, that's when you went on your own, right?
Yep.
And this is part of your story that for me is so fascinating because a lot of people at that time would have either keep doing what they're doing, but you went in like completely, I guess, different.
I'd run these movie companies for a long time and I didn't want to repeat myself and I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I got intrigued with using, this is in the 90s, I got intrigued with using screens for something different than telling stories. Screens could be interactive. I'd only seen a screen being something you projected a story onto, a narrative. But I found out there'd be this interactivity that, screens could be used not only just for passive processes, but interactive processes. As we all know today, that's what we do, interact with screens. And I I got that idea earlier than most. And that fascinated me. So I followed it.
And at this point in time, were you already like, hey, financially done? Do you feel you still needed to make more money or no?
I've never, ever, I was lucky that money was never a factor for me. So I've always had enough resources. And certainly by the time I left Fox, I never had to work, but I had plenty of resources.
So it wasn't a motivator.
I wasn't out to make money.
Yeah, but it wasn't a motivator to you to make more money. It was more kind of going out on your own.
Yeah. I wanted to be independent. I wanted to see. I worked for corporations for 30 years until I was 49 years old. And I thought, I'd really like to see if I could do something on my own, independent of the mother church, of the big company. And so that was my motivation.
One thing that usually, people describe that happens is that your level of like drive and energy goes down with age. It seems for you that you took probably even the hardest part, like from that end, your drive and energy doesn't seem to be getting down. Like what?
Oh yeah, I know. I if I had an explanation for that one.
So I was going to ask you, you weren't at that time, you felt you had as much energy as you had when you were like 32.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't know about my energy. I had, I certainly had as much. I probably had more ambition.
More ambition.
I have no idea why, but I think I probably did because, being independent, if you work for a company and you're a corporatist, you get very much used to that life. It's seductive. You have people taking care of everything for you. You're running large enterprises, and there's an ease of life. If you're successful, there's an ease of life and all. Going out on your own, it's like, what crazy person would do that? Why would you do that? It's only out of some ambition. I mean, it certainly isn't like to perpetuate an easy life.
And what was your first kind of hooray on your own? Like, how did that work?
Well, again, it was serendipity. This is 92, 93. And it was just this early convergence of televisions and telephones and computers that resulted in this early interactivity. So by the time I kind of got started at this was the beginning of the internet. And I had some fluency about how interactivity worked, even primitive interactivity. So when the internet came along in 95, normal folk started using the internet, I was ready. So there was so much opportunity then. It was just like, what's in front of the field? I mean, anything you started, whether it was a dating service or e-commerce service or a travel service or whatever, all that was there for the doing.
But the first one was the kind of TV home shopping, right? That was kind of...
Well, the first one was QVC, which was a television shopping channel, interactive television shopping. And this was this primitive period of convergence.
How did that business model work?
Well, the business model was that you offered retail goods that you sold on television, and people could buy them at that time by a phone interface system. This was before digital, and it was a very profitable business.
And you kept inventory?
Oh yeah.
So it was like a retail, but sold through the TV, vertically integrated all in one.
Yeah. That was the first, but that was really before the internet. Once the internet came along, I didn't have any interest in television shopping. I had interest in e-commerce.
So then you sold it? What did you do with that business?
Which one?
The QVC.
Well, we then went on to buy its competitor, the Home Shopping Network, and then we merged QVC and HSN, and that just became one of the businesses, but then we added 60 businesses onto it.
Oh, wow.
Over a 15-year period.
So that was the IAC?
Yeah.
Oh, so
It eventuated into IAC.
it eventuated. So I was going to get to IAC because there's not a lot of examples of things like IAC in the world, which
No.
were these public companies who built, bought, invested, like did everything like.
It's kind of an original business model, which is that it is it's kind of a conglomerate, anti-conglomerate, because once the businesses that we had bought got up to scale, we would spin them off into an independent company. So we've spun off, I think, 11 companies over this period, public entities from this. We bought and sold many, but we spun many of them off into their own entities.
Why did you come up with this business model? Like, why structure it like this?
It made sense to me, meaning it wasn't invented of whole cloth. It was that I got to a point where I said, which I've talked about earlier, conglomerates are hard to manage and not optimally managed once a company got to a certain size. And I thought, well, when it gets to a certain size, let it be out on its own. And so we just started doing it one after the other and kind of backed into this model.
And it was a public the whole time, right?
All of them public.
Did you like being a public?
I like being public company. Yes, I like public companies.
Why?
I don't know. I guess I like the discipline of it. I think it's that. I like the discipline of it. I like the scoring that a public company allows you to have. I'm not in it for wealth creation, though we've created a lot of wealth, but I just like the system.
Just the surroundings of it. Is there any downside to it in your view?
Of course.
What are the
pain in the ass? I mean, public companies today, and we read today about saying we shouldn't have quarterly reporting, which I think is wise. I think the whole industry of the quarterly reportage and all of the analyst processes that go into it is not very productive. So, there are the downsides to it, but I still like the form.
Do you think that people value IAC properly over the last 20?
No. We never get valued properly.
Why do you think that's the case? Because of the conglomerate?
Because there's a discount. We own other at IAC. Again, we now have 11 publicly traded companies. So probably 13 of them, 14 of them in their further spinoffs. But because the discount that you get, the market will discount you for a whole series of reasons. A holding company gets a discount to its assets, which is understandable. And then there are, if you operate complicated and enterprises that are in different phases of their development, the market will value them not necessarily for their correct weightage, which eventually you get truly weighted and truly valued.
When to spin them off.
Or circumstances are such that they get overvalued, undervalued, etc. So,
like 2000.
Yeah.
Makes sense. And what were the learnings, I guess? What was the similarities between the IAC companies, right? You could have what? None. So you could have done sugar?
Well, no. They were all interactive. So they were all in various forms of e-commerce or media. So they all had that, but they were all different disciplines in it, in the verticals of life.
Did you ever have a big miss, an investment miss?
Oh, I'm sure.
Any that come to mind?
No, I wipe it.
You wipe it?
I wipe the memory clean.
Let's talk a little bit about Expedia. Can you tell, I heard the story before, but I'd love you to tell it. What's the story of how you bought Expedia? Which I guess is probably the more successful of all the IAC companies.
I don't know. I think the Match Group probably dollar for dollar may have been more successful. Yes, I think probably valuations. Anyway, as I say, I had been very interested in anything that was developing as interactivity began. And one of the first areas that could be colonized was travel, on an online travel agency. And so Microsoft had started it, but they were going to sell it. And so we bought it. And it was going to close, I don't know, some 40, 60 days later. And in the middle of its closing, 9/11 came and travel stopped completely. And we had an out clause for change conditions, which people around me said, well, you can't buy this thing. There is no travel. And somebody in the room said, well, if there's life, there's travel. And I said, well, that's it. And we closed the deal. And of course, travel came back, et cetera, et cetera.
And the rest is history.
Man, yeah.
What was the single riskiest bet of your career?
Oh, I would probably say the first bet, making movies for television.
Making a movie for television?
Yeah. The rest, if you get really successful, the less people question you.
Makes sense. So what did you learn about fighting on the Paramount fights when you try to take it back over?
Know when to not make the last bid.
Very good. Who's the toughest CEO you've negotiated with?
Oh, my God. The toughest, Sumner Redstone.
A lot of the very successful people in the business today have worked for you at some point in time. Michael Eisner, Dara, Katzenberg. What was it that you saw? What did you see in people?
I see at earliest stages with people, I see energy and edge and instinct. And that's all I care about. I don't care about experience.
Last one. If you were 20 today, what would you be doing?
I have no clue. What would I be doing if I were 20 and I was looking at this incredibly, we're at the beginning of clearly another revolution, maybe the biggest revolution with artificial intelligence. So if I looked at the world, as I look at the world, I see the only thing I would not want to play in this world that is radically changing, I would want to do actually what we're doing, which is play with hard assets that can't be disintermediated like MGM.
Makes sense. Barry, this was amazing. Thank you so much for doing this.
Talk with you, Enrique.
Thanks to our friends at Atomic Growth for helping with production and distribution.